Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Prosperity 101 Breakroom Economics Podcast. My name is Linda J. Hansen, your host. I seek to unleash the power of employers to reclaim and preserve America by educating employees about public policy issues that affect their jobs. I believe this leads to greater employee loyalty, engagement, and retention, and to an increased awareness of the blessings and responsibilities of living in a free society. Join us each week and be sure to visit prosperity101.com for resources and information. Thank you so much for joining with me today. It is a pleasure to have you with us, and I have another exciting guest that you will definitely want to hear from. It is just a joy to bring to you information about important issues and things that affect our national security, our safety, our economy, your family, your freedom. So thank you for joining with us today. Before we get started, I want to say a special thanks, like I always do, to our Prosperity partners, those who give financially, either monthly or one-time gift now and then to just help us keep the podcast on the air. Those are our Prosperity partners. You can find the Prosperity Partner link on our website, prosperity101.com. And with that being said, we do have some great updates to the website. So if you haven't been there for a while, please visit prosperity101.com. And, you know, we offer customized corporate solutions with the online Breakroom Economics course, with consulting, several things that we can offer to you and your business and help to create a great addition to the freedom economy. Within the freedom economy, we want you to support our strategic partners. Too many are listed on the website and the show notes to mention here today, but I'll select a few to just share a sampling of who we have. So please visit our show notes and the website to see their links and join with the U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce, where you can do kingdom commerce. Your business is more than a business. It can be a ministry. So join with us at the U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce. And if you'd like to be free to hire and free to work without all the woke nonsense, visit Red Balloon. The link is on the website and in the show notes. And if you'd like to save babies with every swipe of your credit card, please visit the link for pro-life payments. Also, one of our newer partners is Mother Nature's Trading Company, where you can get great products for your health and for your horses, your pets, with great cranberry seed oil from Wisconsin. So please visit this wonderful company from Wisconsin. We love to support American-made products. So visit the link on our show notes and the website for Mother Nature's Trading Company. And our newest strategic partner is VA USA, where you can get virtual assistants who are from America. And they are wonderful people, many times military spouses. And you're supporting our freedom economy and the families who are supporting our freedom. So visit the link for VA USA. Now, as I mentioned, all of these products, all of these things we use all the time, and we see things being shipped, purchased, all of that. You know, do you think about it when you drive along the road or when you go to the store? Do you think about the truckers? I know when I do cross-country trips, I'm always astounded at the amount of truckers. And I just think of their safety, their security, their service to our nation and to the world. But there's a lot that's happening within the trucking industry. And you, listener, you need to know about it because it affects you every single day. So here with me today is Shannon Everett. Shannon is one of the founders of American Truckers United. And I recently found out about this organization and have studied and learned and tried to listen to, so many interviews where he has been featured. And I'm just convinced this is one of the most important issues we face. So Shannon, thank you so much for joining with us. And could you share with us basically the mission of American Truckers United and then how you came to be a co-founder?
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, the mission for American Truckers United really is around immigration. And American Truckers United was formed because we saw a gap in the representation by our current industry associations or our special interest groups that were supposed to be speaking up for the American truck driver, but we saw that they weren't adequately doing that when it came to the matter of immigration. And so we speak up for the voices of the American truck driver, but also the small to mid-size American trucking company and the crash victims who have been impacted by these immigration loopholes that are currently taking place in the trucking industry. I used to own a large business in the trucking. I had almost 1,000 trucks, and so I still own a business in the trucking industry, but it's much smaller now. But back in 2019, I had to lay off over 400 American truck drivers when I had to start competing with other trucking companies that were using these non-citizen truck drivers. These truck drivers were using what we call a B1 visitor visa, and so I really struggled with having to lay those guys off, and so this effort, this advocacy that we're working on now really started back then in 2019. That was the very first time that we stood up and started making phone calls and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And so we officially formed American Truckers United last year when we saw not only were people losing their jobs, but people were being killed, and that was when we saw the case of Scott Miller, the crash in Colorado. Scott Miller was killed by a guy who had been deported 16 times, and every time was able to come back into the country in a commercial motor vehicle and just resume working, and until he crashed and killed Scott Miller in Colorado. It was at that time, somebody had already spoken a prophetic word over me. I think a couple weeks before that crash, and said, "Hey, you're called to do something that you're not doing. You need to go do that." And so, I'd prayed that day, and I knew exactly what they were talking about. But then just a couple weeks later, we had the Scott Miller crash, and it was like, "Yes, Lord, I hear you." So we're going to do this thing, and that's what we've done. And so we formed this, and we got up and we started speaking at political events here locally. I've never been a political person. I mean, I'm the guy that would rather watch a debate than watch a football game. Now I am that guy, but I've
Right.
never ran for office or actually been involved and helped people run campaigns and stuff like that. And so, but I knew that this issue was too important not to get involved in that stuff, and so I started attending my local, political party meetings, and then I started asking to speak about the issue. And so what's funny about all this is, it's a much bigger voice now, and there's a lot moving at a federal level. But the very first action, and this is important because grassroots matters, and
Yes.
and you can clearly see that here. But the very first action was a county resolution in our county Republican Party meeting. It was like, "Hey, here's an issue. Here's what's going on." Of course, no one knew about it.
Right.
And so everybody's like gasping, like, "What? These guys are out here driving next to my family, And so we presented the issue in the county Republican Party meeting. We presented a resolution. It passed unanimously. Hey, representatives, go do something. And so I say that because I just want to encourage everybody. Like, it starts there.
Absolutely.
It starts
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, that's really a great story. I was a GOP county chair for 9 years, I think, in a small county. I ended up having, I then became assistant district chair for our congressional district too. I served in that role for 1 year. I filled out a term, and was really thankful for that opportunity. And serving at that level in a relatively small community, I think prepared me the best for actually, helping being deputy chief of staff of a presidential campaign or doing everything I do now, because you're so close to the people and what their everyday experience is. And in the county party, in that part is where you can start to make a difference. You can start to bring forth these resolutions. I used to tell people all the time who would complain about Republicans. Well, they're like, "Don't you just complain, or don't you hate that?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a Republican. I don't like everything, but you're never going to find a perfect politician, and not even if you run yourself, and but you start to make change from the bottom up. I mean, if you want to lose weight, you don't lose 100 pounds in one, month. You lose, you lose, what do
Amen.
they say, a pound a week or something. You make small changes, and everything begins at the local level. And my former boss, colleague, friend, mentor, Herman Cain, would always say, if you want to solve a problem, go to the people closest to the problem to find the solution. And so by you going to that local level and the people understanding how much it affects their family, that really helped to bring about solutions that, we haven't quite fully realized yet,
Yeah.
but you've got the ball rolling, and that is fantastic. And so kudos to you, and kudos to the county party that you were working with, who understood the need and took a stand. It is we the people still, and that's where it begins.
And so further to that point, I said I hadn't been engaged, but I had a neighbor that said, "Hey, you should really get involved in these county committee meetings, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And so the very first meeting that I went to, there was a lady that was, her name's Jennifer Lancaster. She was given a speech, and I saw boldness in her. I saw courageousness in her. And I was like, man, what is that? And then she started quoting some scripture, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I know what that is.
Yeah.
And so the scripture that she quoted was Ephesians 6:13, and it was talking about the armor of God. And I think she went further than that and talked about the battle against the principalities of darkness and evil and all that stuff. Well, that was confirmation. So the Lord speaks to me through confirmations, and I call them God winks. And so that was a confirmation for me, because in my pocket at that meeting was a coin when anytime I get a chance to pray for someone, I pass out this coin, and on that coin is the armor of God, and it's Ephesians 6:10 through 6:20. And so when she got through speaking, me not knowing her, I gave her that coin. And so that same coin that I gave Jennifer at that meeting, when I saw courage in her, when I saw boldness in her, uh, that kind of was kind of one of the stepping stones to me eventually, months later, answering that call and seeing the Scott Miller thing. But that coin is on the top of the logo of American Truckers United. When you look at the truck, there's a little emblem on the top of the truck, and that's an armor of God emblem, talking about Ephesians 16, and that this is a spiritual battle, and it's not flesh and blood. And I just want to say that too, to say what we're experiencing and what we're going through, whether it's this war situation that's going on right now over in the Middle East, or it's this trucking situation that I'm battling. It's all spiritual, and we have to come at it from that perspective, and we have to come at it with Him, aligned with Him. And I'm just excited to do that.
Yeah,
That's where
well, amen to that. I love that. And we are in a spiritual battle. That is exactly what we say. I noticed on your website, you said we are a Christian in foundation. But I forget the words you said, but it's you're Christian in foundation in your organization, but you basically serve everybody. And I thought, isn't that what we're supposed to be anyway? I mean, it was just a beautiful testimony. Your entire mission on your website. I'll just read this for people. It says, mission statement of American Truckers United. At American Truckers United, we stand as a beacon of hope and support in these trying times faced by the American trucking industry. Founded on the bedrock of Christian values, our organization extends its arm to our American truck drivers, American trucking companies, and the victims of truck-related accidents, alongside their families, in a community where faith guides our unity and actions. And it was just beautiful. And you talked about your mission to care, to advocate, to unite, to uphold Christian values, to act, and to trust in divine guidance. And what more can we do, right? That is where, when we're asked to serve, that is what we do. We trust in divine guidance and pray that He will lead us. Your advocacy has been really exciting to me. I've seen you on many interviews, and it's just an honor to have you. I know when we first connected, I told you I've been trying to get to you for a while, ever since the first time I heard you. But there's so many issues. You touched on the immigration issue, and this affects everything. It affects our hiring laws. It affects affects the safety on our roads. When we have drivers that are non-citizens and they can't read or understand English, I mean, which to me seems common sense. Wouldn't we want people to read and understand English? I mean, it's hard enough to read all the symbols on the signs that the Department of Transportation or County Transportation please put out. You don't always know what symbol they mean, but we need people who understand our laws, who are wanting to obey our laws, and who understand our culture and the way we do things. I even heard you talk about how at some of the truck stops they've had to close down because the culture of some of these people, I mean, the bathroom culture, everything, it just leads to so many problems. So, we don't want to be exclusionary. We don't want to turn anybody away. We love legal immigrants and we love law-abiding citizens. And we want to help people have great careers in the trucking industry, but this isn't how to do it. So could you address, I know I kind of covered a lot of the things that you talk about, but, start where you want to start and then let's branch out, because by the time the interview is over, I also want the listeners to know something that they can do to help solve this problem.
For us, it's really about, law and order and accountability. And so, the trucking industry that I've been a part of for 25 years has always been a very good example of order and structure, and that's because we're very regulated.
Right.
We've got an agency it's well funded, and every state has a Department of Transportation of officers that specialize in commercial motor vehicle safety, and so we've always been over regulated, and so I've always actually been proud of that. I think trucking's always been a pretty safe industry. And so it's like, what happened? Why in the world? Why would you take something that's so overregulated and has so many safety barriers and standards in place to protect everyone, and say, for this group of people, this is the standard, but for this group of people, there is no standard.
Right.
And that's what we've been trying to really scream about. It's like, what is this? How is it acceptable to require all these guys to have all this training and qualification? I mean, an American truck driver can't even have a certain measurement on his neck without having his license to be downgraded because of sleep apnea and things like that, or if he has high blood pressure. And so we've got all of these really high standards, which I'm for. It's safer.
Right.
I'm not saying deregulate. I'm saying make sure that the line goes straight across for everyone. And then you've got this other group of drivers over here that let's just talk about the guys coming up from Mexico right now on these B1 visitor visas. Number one, they're on a visitor visa. They're not supposed to be working. And then we can't run any MVR checks on these guys. So a part of the driver qualification process is you're supposed to do pre-employment screening. Well, if you can't run MVRs and if you don't have any backgrounds on these guys, how did they ever do that? They didn't. But there's no one that's enforcing that same rule that's on these American truck drivers on these guys. And I don't know if that's if that's because of political bias or if that's some kind of protectionism that they've got on those because of their status, but it's not right. And so having an English proficiency law and not enforcing it, it's a clearly stated law in the books. Why are we not enforcing it? And so it's those things. It's like, man, this is not okay. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with safety and economics, accountability. In the case, I was talking earlier about the case of Scott Miller that really reeled us into this. And I saw Deanne and her daughter Michelle on TV in tears saying, "How's this possible? I'm going to spend my time fighting for regulations in the trucking industry." It's like, well, the trucking industry the regulation's not the problem. The trucking industry is already overregulated. The problem is the lack of enforcement, and the lack of enforcement because of a political bias. And so, the accountability thing, when I was trying to think of the guy's name, Ignacio was the suspect in the case of Scott's accident. He's already out of jail. He has been deported now. And that's just because of the administration cycle that we're in right now and when he got released from jail. But I will say, Miss Deanne was said that ICE was very responsive and very helpful through the whole process. As soon as the alert came that he was being released from serving time on the misdemeanor, ICE was standing there waiting on him and immediately took him and got him out of the country. But at the same time, I'm concerned because here's a man that was already previously deported 16 times, got in a commercial motor vehicle and come right back across the border. And so those mechanisms that allowed him to get here all those times are still available today, even in this new administration, because the loopholes in the trucking industry have not been addressed.
That is, I love that you say loopholes in the trucking industry. You know, you talk about there's laws on the books that are supposed to prevent some of this, but there's obvious loopholes. And I know that you have been active in different states. I have followed, you know, your work, and I've seen that some states are now having legislation about English only trucking in the industry, you know, citizens only. Can you address some of that legislation? Because that legislation that is moving forward positively in various states can be model legislation for other states. But also, we need to know what it is at the federal level that we need to ask our senators and representatives to do to make sure that laws are passed to close these loopholes and provide safety for all American citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. So the legislation that first got filed in all of these discussions was House Bill 1569 in the state of Arkansas. That bill came in response to look. I've never been a part of drafting legislation or writing bills or suggesting bills or anything like that. But what happened was we're representing these families. We've got Miss Deanne, we've got Miss LaDonya, and we're talking about the tragedies of these crashes. And we're getting up and we're speaking around the state of Arkansas. And then out of nowhere comes legislation for a special session in the state house for a bill to legalize non-domiciled CDLs. And up until that point, I was focused on foreign CDLs. I'd never even heard of a non-domicile CDL. And so when that legislation came through, and it come into my hands through the sponsor at a county committee meeting, and he said, "Hey, will you look at this?" And so I looked at it and I was like, "Oh man, what is this?" And I actually fired that. I guess I was a little testy in my email because he got a little testy back. But I was like, "What in the world is this? We're talking about making the roads safer. Why would we legalize a non?" So what they wanted to do was they wanted to change state law that currently said that to drive a commercial motor vehicle in the state of Arkansas, you had to have a U.S. commercial driver's license or a Canadian driver's license. They wanted to strike U.S. and Canada, and they wanted to add the words non-domiciled learner's permit, non-domiciled CDL from any foreign jurisdiction. And so the new state law in Arkansas would have said to operate a commercial motor vehicle, you only need a non-domiciled commercial learner's permit or a non-domiciled commercial driver's license from any foreign jurisdiction. And I'm like, what? So you're saying that a guy from the Philippines or a guy from Ethiopia is a great example. There's so much poverty over there. A lot of people don't drive cars. So a guy from Ethiopia could have a learner's permit from Ethiopia and come drive a commercial motor vehicle in the state of Arkansas? No, absolutely not. Like, what are you talking about? And they came back at me and said, well, 3 attorney generals from Texas said this is okay. It's like, well, this is Arkansas. This isn't Texas. And I don't know who you're talking about or what they were thinking, but that's not what we're doing in Arkansas.
Good for you.
And so that's when the battle started. That's when so at first we're just saying, hey, there's crashes. Please help these people. Please help these people. And then, God, so one of the things that we set out to do is we're only going to go through the doors that God opens. Well, so he swung that door wide open, like, hey, what's going on here? And then so we got up and we started talking about, hey, they're trying to pass a bill. They're trying to run this bill through. And I had a Representative Wayne Long, came forward out of the House, and he said, Shannon, I'd like to help y'all. I'll write a bill. And I said, oh man, that's great. How do we do this? And he said, well, you've got their language. Let's just take their language and fix all of that and address it the way it needs to be addressed. And so Wayne Long took the concerns of Deanne Mueller. He took the concerns of LaDonya Bryant from accountability, from lack of enforcement, And he drafted House Bill 1569, which is the Secure and Safe Roads Act, and filed it in Arkansas. And so that's that. It wasn't until that bill got filed that this really became an issue. I don't know. At American Truckers United, we started doing some videos, and so we've got some English proficiency videos and stuff like that dating back to September of last year, where we were putting those out on social media and things, and really wasn't getting a lot of traction. But we were saying, hey, y'all are driving on highways with a bunch of people who
Right.
don't speak English. But once Wayne filed that bill, then we had a battle, and people like battles and they like watching battles. And so because we filed that bill, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later, they filed that trash bill that they were trying to do. So Arkansas ended up having two competing bills in the trucking industry going at the same time, and that's where it really got interesting. We got called into a meeting. We got called into a meeting with the chair of transportation, with the chief of the highway patrol, with vice chair of transportation, with our sponsors, with a legislative liaison from the Arkansas State Police, and we all get in there and we give them a presentation on behalf of our crash victims and everybody. Like, hey, so why'd y'all file this bill? What's going on here? So we give them the rundown, and they're all aghast. State police confirm everything we said was happening. Yes, that's
Mm-hmm.
happened. Highway police says yes, it's going on, but the highway police was really against us, and they said, hey, this is a federal issue. We can't address it at the state level. And so one of the key problems that they had a problem with was the fact that the bill that Wayne had drafted said that he wanted the trucks to be put out of service. And so if a guy can't speak English, put the truck out of service. Well, that's what the federal law says. So all we're trying to do is codify into state law what the feds are already saying, so that our state law enforcement, our county law enforcement, and our local law enforcement can enforce a law, right?
Common
And so
sense. No,
yeah,
just common sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you got, I guess if you got a federal law and the feds are saying stand down, you don't really have anything to enforce. But if we've got something codified at the state level, I don't care what they're saying. We've got state law here. We've got state law enforcement officers. Let's enforce the law. And so that was the objective. And so they pushed back that only federal officers can enforce out of service criteria. And so that I really thought they had us for a minute. I was like, man, they're probably right about that. So we went back and talked to the lawyers and Representative Long, and came back and said, well, let's impound them. Let's impound their trucks. and and so there's nothing to stop an impound. A county cop can impound, a local cop can impound, your state police can impound. And so we jumped their hurdle. Not only did we jump their hurdle,
Right.
we really rocked their boat, because now it just went up a notch. It's like, okay, we're going to impound these trucks. And so we addressed their concern. And look, leaving that meeting, that was a great day. There was a lot of optimism. Like, we have a solution here. We've got our state agencies involved. This thing's headed on the right direction. Well, the Arkansas Trucking Association refused to attend the meeting. And then right after that, I'm sure you're very familiar with how all this works. Right after that, calls went out, and opinions were had. The next day, it's like, hey, we're going to have to address this at the federal level. We're not going to advance this bill. And those whispers started happening. It's like, what? How's this possible? How can we not have our bill heard? And so at that same time, their bill gets filed, and this battle is on in Arkansas. I mean, it was intense, from at least from our spot and their spot. Maybe not from everybody else looking in,
Uh-huh.
but and so we never got to have our committee hearing in Arkansas. We spent all of our time in committee defending or fighting against the bill that they filed, House Bill 1745. We were successful in getting them to drop. I didn't even realize at the time how important it was, because we were still trying to catch up with non-domicile language and what exactly non-domicile CDL was. And everything was happening so fast. I have a completely different understanding of it today, and how we got here and exactly what's taking place, than I did in that little rush of 60 days of legislation. But so we got them to drop the non-domicile language, and so they removed that from their bill. And then in the 11th hour, after they'd already gotten out of the House and gotten over to Senate Judiciary, they started getting some dissension. And so they added in the English proficiency in the committee hearing. And so they didn't take it out of service. The only add they did was, okay, we're going to put English proficiency in, which is what we had in ours, but it's just going to be a citation, and then they let the driver go. And so the whole point of the bill was, if a guy doesn't speak English, get him off the road. And so they put that in there and then started flying banners like, oh, we're doing English proficiency, we're doing it, but they weren't. It was the same problem. It still wasn't out of service. Anyway, they ended up passing that bill. That was House Bill 1745. And so God's plan is always better than our plan. My plan was, we're going to go file HB 1569,
Uh-huh.
and we're going to get that passed in Arkansas, and it's all just going to work. Well, God's plan was to allow all of that to rise up and everybody to see it, to see that, and He let that be revealed, and so I'm thankful for that. And then he had a trucker from Oklahoma, Cole Stevens, who was facing the same economic struggles as our Arkansas truck drivers. He's got a great outfit over in Oklahoma. He reached out to his senator and said, "Man, we've got a huge problem in trucking. He'd seen some of our content and he'd read some of the news reports. And he said, we've got to do something about this. This is going to put everybody out of business if this is allowed to continue. We can't compete with these guys." And so, Cole's a believer. Senator Sacchieri is a believer. And so I say this is another open door. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, one morning, I'm driving into work. I get this unknown number from Oklahoma. I'm like, I usually don't answer that stuff, but at 6 o'clock intrigued me to get an unknown number.
Yeah, it's
So
not usually a spam call at 6 a.m.
I answered it, and it was Senator Sacchieri, and she said, "Hey, we've got a trucker in trouble over here in Oklahoma. He says this stuff is rampant. Can you fill me in?" And so I started briefing them on all the issues. And I'm gonna tell you, Miss Kendall's my hero. Also, Representative John Wilk in the House over there. I'm talking about two fighters, two patriotic American heroes for the American truck driver. They not only received what I was telling them, they took it another level. They dug in, they did their research, they started calling around and talking to other truckers, and then rallying the support in the state of Oklahoma with the different industries and throughout the leadership. It was a completely different experience. So I got to stand there beside Cole and watch him have the complete opposite experience of what we faced in Arkansas, because the governor was behind it, the Senate leadership was behind it, the House leadership was behind it. And and they don't have a trucking association over there with the same kind of financial firepower that we do in Arkansas. We've got some pretty big names in that
Well,
association over here.
and that brings me to a question. And actually, because this is going, and I would love to ask you one, could you stay on a little extra?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I will make this into a two-part interview.
Okay.
Because we are, and so listeners, I'm so thrilled that he is going to stay on. We're hearing this fight at the state level. And, it started with a county party resolution. It started with you going to a local meeting and starting to educate people on the problem. And it grew into a state issue, and now a multi-state issue, right? And now we're really seeing this at the federal level heating up. So listeners, I just want to encourage you as a listener or a viewer of this podcast, you can make a difference. Look at the difference that Shannon has made by just speaking up and walking through the open doors that God provided, right? And going out in faith. And if you stay for the second episode, if you join with us for the second, you'll hear some things that he went through, some of the battles that he fought. And it's not always easy when you're fighting for things that are about freedom and truth and righteousness. And you talked about some of the organizations that opposed you. Before we do move into the second episode, or the second part of the interview, I would say, I would like you to address why would they oppose you? I mean, to people listening, so often we're at home, we watch these things unfold, and, the 77 million Americans go, well, duh, right? But it's like we watch it unfold, and it seems like it would be so common sense. This would make so much sense to have only English speaking drivers, only citizens on the road. So you tell me, I mean, I know basically the answer, but tell our listeners who's benefiting the most by not doing this? And then we'll dive into that a little bit more as we go into the second part of the interview.
I think the situation we faced in Arkansas had two sources of opposition. I mean, it was really one key source, but there was two reasons for the opposition. And number one, as we have learned, they architected what we were experiencing. And so it's kind of hard for the architect to say, oh, that's a flawed design, you know. And so they were really dug in because of their involvement in the current design. And then the second thing was the economics of it. And so the who benefits from bringing in a bunch of slave labor to suppress the American worker at the same time making our roads more dangerous. Well, that's the people paying for the shipping charges. And so large shippers, and I would take that even a step further, that have facilitated this practice through brokerages. Those two entities are the ones who have profited from this. And so an illegal alien driving a commercial motor vehicle that can't speak English isn't calling a Fortune 500 company and saying, hey, can I haul loads for you? Okay. That's not happening. What's happening is large brokerages, multi-billion dollar brokerages are going to shippers and saying, hey, all of a sudden we've got a bunch of new truck drivers and trucks and we can haul your loads for you. Will you let us put them on an electronic load board and we'll match them up with available trucks and drivers and we'll list them out there and they can bid on their phones and they can bid on apps and then we'll do all the processing and then we'll put it on your truck. And they say, absolutely. You'll save us money? Yeah, we'll save you a lot of money. And so they've created these load boards and these apps where they've taken out that interaction so that shipper is not communicating with this guy that speaks Russian. He's not communicating with him. Right. Where historically you had to have this transactional relationship with an American truck driver and you had to negotiate the rates and all. Well, so now this gig economy has taken that element out and there's a man in the middle that's making a margin off of that arbitrage. And that's the real villain. That's our villain. And so it's that wage suppression is really wage theft. So they've stolen the living standard and the wages of the American truck driver, and they've put it in the pockets of these brokers. And then an element of that has trickled down to the shipper. And so in Arkansas, there's a group of shippers that are connected to the trucking association. They not only are they truckers, but they also have their own private fleet, and so they benefit from the suppression of the wages of the drivers. If you look at the majority of the trucking association, they're good people. They're middle-sized truckers. There's some large truckers in there, but the Arkansas Trucking Association is just an extension of the American Trucking Association. And when you have billion-dollar enterprises involved in your small trucking association, you quickly lose your voice. And so what we're experiencing is there should be a different association. There should be a separation of these voices because those voices inside of there don't have the same interest and they don't have the same concerns. They don't share the same concerns. And so it's really lost its way. Now over in Oklahoma, they don't have that same problem because they're still connected to the American Trucking Association, but they don't have that local voice that's really coming in there and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. They're still captive though to what the American Trucking Association wants to do. And so I would say it's those two things that,
Well,
that,
there's
that really
always Yeah, there's always money lining someone's pocket on these things, and we see it anytime we see government corruption. There's always a money trail. I do want to just pause right here. I want to continue the interview, but I'm going to make it into a two-part because there's so many things that we haven't even covered yet, and I want to because it's so important. So for this section of the interview, so listeners, you can contact Shannon by going to the website. Please give the web address and how they might contact you personally.
Yeah, please visit us at www.americantruckers.com. And there's a registration page where you don't have to be a truck driver. There's a concerned citizens page where you can just sign up and register for our newsletters and stay updated on exactly what we're working on, both from the legislative front, but also other things that we're doing for these crash victims and helping them with some litigation.
Well, absolutely. And so listeners do that, but then also please make sure you tune in to the next episode of the podcast where we are going to follow up on this and go into a little more detail, talk about things at the federal level, but also talk about what it takes at the core of a person to fight the Goliaths in industry and in government. And that's something I think we all need to know, especially at this point in time. We're all here for such a time as this, like Queen Esther in Scripture. We are here, and God has a purpose for our lives and for what we can do to help his purposes and our fellow men and women. And so we just really want you to be encouraged to get involved like Shannon did. Wasn't really involved politically, but saw an issue that he felt called to serve, and it's making an incredible difference, and I'm sure saving lives. So please not only share this episode with others, but then let's make sure you tune in next week to the part 2 of this, and let's make sure that we get this information out to as many people as possible. Send it to your elected officials at the state and local levels. Send it to your representatives and senators at the federal levels, and send it to the Department of Transportation. Send it to the Homeland Security. These are all things that are really important. So you at home, whether you're viewing this on video or audio, you can make a difference, just like Shannon has done. So, Shannon, thank you. And we are going to just move into the next wave of information to provide for the listeners. But we thank you for this particular time. And again, listeners, go to prosperity101.com where you can support our strategic partners and become a prosperity partner, but also make sure you go to the podcast tab and you'll see all the show notes from this show and be able to know how to contact Shannon from there as well. So stay tuned as we continue the recording, and that'll be released as a part 2 for the follow-up episode. So thank you, listeners. Thank you again for listening to the Prosperity 101 podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a great review. Don't forget to visit prosperity101.com to access the entire podcast library, to order my newest book, Job Security Through Business Prosperity, the essential guide to understanding how policy affects your paycheck, or to enroll you or your employees in the Breakroom Economics online course. You can also receive the free ebook, 10 tips for helping employees understand how public policy affects their paychecks. Freedom is never free. Understanding the foundations of prosperity and the policies of prosperity will help you to protect prosperity as you become informed, involved, and impactful. Please contact us today at prosperity101.com to let us know how we can serve you. Thank you.